You're probably going to remember this feeling immediately. You're sitting quietly, maybe driving, taking a shower, trying to fall asleep, and suddenly your brain brings back something embarrassing you did 10 years ago. Maybe you said something stupid. Maybe you waved at someone who wasn't waving at you. Maybe you told a joke and nobody laughed. Maybe you called someone by the wrong name. And the strange part is that you don't just remember it. For a few seconds, you actually feel it again. The heat in your face. The tension in your body. That sudden urge to disappear. And then you ask yourself a question. Why do I still remember that? Why is my brain holding on to this one awkward moment when I can barely remember what I had for lunch 3 days ago? Here's the surprising answer. Your brain doesn't remember embarrassing moments because they were important to everyone else. It remembers them because, in that moment, they felt important to you. And once you understand why your mind treats embarrassment almost like a warning label, those memories start to make a lot more sense. Think about all the completely normal moments from your past that have disappeared. You probably don't remember most conversations from school. You don't remember thousands of times you walked into a room. You don't remember every meal, every meeting, every car ride, every ordinary Tuesday. But somehow, your brain has preserved that one moment when you tripped in front of a group of people in 2008. Why? Because your brain is not designed to record your life like a security camera. It is constantly deciding what might matter. And embarrassment sends a very powerful signal. Something happened that made you feel exposed. You may have felt judged. You may have felt rejected. You may have felt like other people suddenly saw you differently. For the brain, especially the social part of the brain, that can feel significant. Human beings have always depended on other human beings. For most of our history, belonging to a group mattered enormously. Being accepted meant safety, cooperation, protection, and survival. Being rejected could have serious consequences. Of course, today, making an awkward comment in a meeting is not a survival emergency. But your nervous system doesn't always react according to modern logic. Sometimes it reacts according to something much older. You say something embarrassing. The room gets quiet. Someone gives you a strange look. And suddenly your body reacts as if something important has happened. Your heart rate changes. Your face gets warm. Your attention narrows. And your brain starts recording. This matters. Don't forget this. Avoid this in the future. That is one reason embarrassing memories can stay with you for years. Your brain may be treating them as lessons. The problem is that the lesson is often much bigger than the actual event. Maybe you made one awkward mistake during a presentation. But your brain doesn't simply store, "I forgot one sentence." It might store something closer to, "Speaking in front of people is dangerous." Or maybe you sent a message to the wrong person. One uncomfortable moment. But afterward, your brain starts scanning the memory again and again. What was I thinking? Why did I do that? What must they think of me? And every time you replay the event, something interesting happens. You strengthen your relationship with the memory. The memory becomes easier to access. This is one of the reasons some embarrassing moments feel almost impossible to forget. You may think you remember them because they were objectively huge. But sometimes you remember them because you have rehearsed them hundreds of times. Not intentionally. Your mind simply keeps returning to them. It's like walking through the same path in a field. The first time, there is barely a trail. But after walking through it again and again, the path becomes clearer. Your thoughts can work the same way. The more often you mentally revisit an embarrassing moment, the easier it becomes for your brain to find it. And here's where things become even more interesting. You probably assume other people remember your embarrassing moments as clearly as you do. But they usually don't. This is connected to something psychologists often describe as the spotlight effect. We tend to overestimate how much other people notice us. You walk into a room with a stain on your shirt, and you feel like everyone can see it. You make a mistake while talking, and you assume everyone noticed. You say something awkward at dinner, and later that night, you imagine the entire table discussing it after you left. But most people are busy thinking about themselves. They are worrying about what they said, what they look like, whether people like them, whether they made a mistake. The person who watched you stumble over your words may have forgotten about it 5 minutes later. Meanwhile, you're still replaying it 12 years later. Isn't that strange? You are carrying a memory that may barely exist in anyone else's mind. And that leads to an uncomfortable but freeing realization. Sometimes the person judging you the most is you. Embarrassment often feels like other people are watching. But long after the moment is over, the audience is gone. The room is gone. The conversation is over. And yet you continue performing the scene for yourself. Again. And again. And again. Imagine a man who remembers asking a question during class when he was 15 years old. The teacher looked at him and said, "We just covered that." A few people laughed. Maybe the entire moment lasted 10 seconds. But 20 years later, he still remembers it. Now here's the important question. Does he remember it because those people still think about it? Probably not. Does his old teacher remember it? Probably not. Do the students who laughed remember it? Almost certainly not. So why does it still exist so vividly in his mind? Because the event became connected to an emotion. Maybe shame. Maybe humiliation. Maybe the fear of looking stupid. And emotional memories have a way of staying with us. Especially when we keep giving them attention. But there is another reason embarrassing memories can feel so painful. They often attack our idea of who we are. You might think of yourself as intelligent, and then you say something that sounds foolish. You might see yourself as confident, and then you panic during a conversation. You might believe you are socially capable, and then you have one incredibly awkward interaction. The embarrassing moment creates a conflict. This is not who I thought I was. And your brain doesn't like unresolved contradictions. So it keeps returning to the memory. Trying to understand it. Trying to rewrite it. Trying to figure out how it happened. This is why you sometimes replay a conversation and suddenly think of the perfect thing you should have said. Hours later. Days later. Or even years later. Your brain is still trying to solve a problem that no longer exists. You imagine going back in time. This time, you say the right thing. This time, everyone laughs at the joke. This time, you don't trip. This time, you sound confident. But you can't go back. And that inability to change the past can make the memory even more frustrating. Here's something else that may surprise you. When you remember an embarrassing moment, you are not necessarily watching an exact recording of what happened. Memory is not a perfect video archive. Every time you remember something, your mind reconstructs it. You may remember the main event accurately, but the emotional meaning of that event can change over time. You might even exaggerate how bad it was. Maybe 3 people noticed, but years later, your memory feels like the entire room stopped and stared at you. Maybe someone laughed, but your mind transforms that into everyone laughing. Maybe there was a 2-second pause, but it now feels like an eternity. The emotional version of the memory can become larger than the original event. And if you've ever thought, "I can't believe I did that," there is something else worth considering. The fact that you are embarrassed by your past self may actually be evidence that you have changed. Think about that. The person who did that embarrassing thing is not exactly the person you are now. You have learned. You have matured. You understand the situation differently. So when you look back and cringe, Part of what you are experiencing is the distance between who you were and who you are now. You are judging an older version of yourself using information that version didn't have. That's not always fair. Imagine meeting your younger self. Would you really stand in front of them and say, "You're so stupid. I can't believe you did that"? Maybe. But if you saw them as an actual person, standing there, nervous and imperfect, you might feel something else. You might understand them. You might even feel compassion for them. And perhaps that is the missing piece when it comes to embarrassing memories. We often give other people context. If someone else says something awkward, we might think they were nervous. If someone else makes a mistake, we might think it happens. But when we make the same mistake, suddenly it becomes evidence of some permanent flaw. They must think I'm an idiot. I always embarrass myself. Why am I like this? One small moment becomes an entire identity. And that is where embarrassment can become more painful than it needs to be. The event happens once. But the mind keeps repeating the punishment. Here's a simple example. Imagine that you are at a party and you accidentally spill a drink. You apologize. Someone helps clean it up. The conversation continues. 10 minutes later, everyone is talking about something else. The event is over. But when you get home, your brain starts the replay. Why did I do that? Did I look ridiculous? Did everyone think I was clumsy? Then the next morning, you remember it again. A week later, it pops into your mind while you're brushing your teeth. Years later, something reminds you of that party. And suddenly, there it is. The original embarrassment may have lasted 30 seconds. But the total amount of suffering you experience can become hours. Not because the event is still happening, but because your brain has learned that this memory deserves attention. So what can you do when an embarrassing memory suddenly appears? The first thing is surprisingly simple. Don't immediately fight it. Trying to force yourself not to think about something can sometimes make it more noticeable. Instead, recognize what is happening. Oh, my brain is bringing this memory back again. That small change matters. You are no longer completely inside the memory. You are observing the process. Then ask yourself something important. What am I assuming about this moment? Maybe you are assuming everyone remembers. Maybe you are assuming everyone judged you. Maybe you are assuming one awkward moment defined how people saw you forever. But do you actually know that? Or is your mind filling in the blanks? Another useful question is this. If someone else had done exactly the same thing, would I still think about it years later? Probably not. You might not even remember it tomorrow. And that perspective can be incredibly powerful. Because it reminds you that your embarrassing moment was probably not the global event your brain turned it into. It was a human moment. That's all. An awkward moment. A mistake. A bad joke. A strange comment. A misunderstanding. A moment where you didn't know what to do. And here is perhaps the biggest psychological twist of all. The people who never embarrass themselves are not necessarily better at life. Sometimes they are simply taking fewer risks. They aren't raising their hand. They aren't starting conversations. They aren't trying something new. They aren't putting themselves in situations where they might look foolish. But if you want to live fully, embarrassment is almost unavoidable. You will say the wrong thing sometimes. You will misunderstand people. You will fail publicly. You will have moments where you wish you could disappear. That isn't proof that you're doing life badly. In many cases, it's proof that you're actually participating in it. And years from now, some of the things that embarrass you today may become stories you laugh about. That is one of the strangest things about time. The event doesn't change. But your relationship with it can. Something that once made you want to hide can eventually become almost funny. You might look back and think, wow, I really thought that was the end of the world. And maybe that is the perspective your present self is missing. There are probably things happening to you right now that feel enormous. Moments you are analyzing. Mistakes you are replaying. Things you said that you wish you could take back. But years from now, you may barely remember them. And even if you do remember them, the emotion may be gone. So the next time your brain suddenly brings back something embarrassing from years ago, try to pause before attacking yourself. Remember what is actually happening. Your brain is doing what brains often do. It is holding on to emotionally charged experiences. It is trying to protect you from repeating something uncomfortable. It is overestimating how much other people noticed. And it may be replaying a memory simply because you have replayed it before. You don't have to turn every embarrassing memory into evidence against yourself. You can let it be what it was. A moment. One moment. Not your identity. Not your entire personality. Not a permanent record of your worth. Just a moment when you were human in front of other humans. And maybe the reason you still cringe when you remember something from 10 years ago is not because you need to keep punishing yourself. Maybe it is because a part of you is still asking for a different response. Not more shame. Not another replay. But understanding. Because the truth is, you cannot go back and protect your past self from every awkward moment. But you can stop abandoning that version of yourself every time the memory returns. You can look at that person you used to be and say, yeah, that was embarrassing. But you survived it. And then you can continue living. Because someday, the version of you 10 years from now may look back at the person you are today. And hopefully, instead of feeling nothing but embarrassment, they'll recognize something more important. Someone who was learning. Someone who was trying. Someone who occasionally looked foolish. And someone who kept going anyway. If this helped you understand your mind better, subscribe for more videos like this.